they do that, don't they?
Oh, it's terrible. I like this. These hurricanes. I was thinking about buying some, whatever it is. Whatever it is. Mail order. Did you ever see Birthday Girl?
That was a pretty good movie,
It
actually.
was, wasn't it?
Nicole Kidman.
I want to buy one like that. Well, it looks
No,
like
no, no,
that.
you don't want to.
Not
No,
one
no,
like
no,
that,
no,
no. I don't want the brother and the cousin and the boyfriend.
My roll got squished.
Oh. Just look at it. Oh, squish it up.
But anyway,
Toilet flushing?
Stop.
yeah, it's been interesting. Actually. Is it going well?
quality of their own material was what they wanted to hear. The Beatles soon became the most popular and sought.
And what was he telling us he meant to do? So when we were around here, we did on Friday, we did a telephone call later, and so he could say the plan is to sort of follow up and do all Monday. Who will intend returning to them before the end of the country? I said we don't have time now, because Monday was the end of the Thursday, and we have so much to do in Monday. I understand that
left-hand side, if you look along here on the left, you will see Liverpool Town Hall, and have a look at the balcony, because on that balcony there, on the 10th of July 1964, the Beatles waved to the vast crowds who'd come here to see them attending their civic reception, myself included. There were little dots in the distance, and
Okay, let me do you now, Randy. Okay, just stick your head through here. Wait, okay. Now rest his turn. Alright, just a sec. Okay, Dad, you go. Dad. Okay, there we go. Grant. There's some trying to get videos.
right now, just as we're coming along here, coming up on the left-hand side is the Mersey Tunnel. The tunnel that runs from Liverpool under the River Mersey comes out the other side at Birkenhead. On the far side, the sandstone building is Liverpool Museum. Well worth a visit and free to visit. Excellent place. This is St John's Gardens here on the left-hand side also. But just coming up here on the right-hand side, there's a red brick building called the Royal Court Theatre. It used to be the legitimate theatre, the likes of Noel Coward, Michael Caine. A Welshman called Richard Burton made his stage debut at the Royal Court when he was 18 years old. He may be familiar to you. He was often married to Elizabeth Taylor. To all parts of Britain, apart from Scotland, you need to change at Preston. The very first successful passenger railway in the world started from Liverpool to Manchester in 1830. Here on the left-hand side is St George's Hall, a concert hall, reopening very shortly after a £25 million refurbishment. Coming up here on the right-hand side is the Empire Theatre, the largest theatre in Britain, seats 2,300, and as you can see it's all the big shows, the likes of Chicago, Guys and Dolls, Riverdance, Oliver. The Beatles actually played there 5 times. Ahead on the left-hand side you'll see the building with the 2 white statues. That is the Walker Art Gallery, one of the finest collections of art in the world, and also a good place to go for lunch. 3 years ago, Paul McCartney had an art exhibition there, which I'll tell you a little more about shortly, because coming up here on the right-hand side is the Odeon Cinema. On 10th of July 1964, the Beatles attended the northern premiere of A Hard Day's Night there. Well, we think they did, because there were hundreds of thousands of people, and a car did drive up, and possibly 4 people got out, but we never knew, because there was about 500,000 people on the streets. The Beatles had come to Liverpool for a civic reception, and they landed at what was then called regards to Broad Street. Not one of his better efforts, I must say. It wasn't really good. Just to go back to the Empire Theatre, originally John Lennon with his band the Quarrymen went to a talent show there. Well, they weren't very talented because they never made it past the first round. It was a case of thank you, next. But as I say, the Beatles appeared there 5 times. The last time was on the 5th of December 1965. The last time the Beatles played anywhere in Britain to a paying audience was the Capitol Cinema in Cardiff on the 12th of December 1965. Of course, the last performance was on the rooftop of Apple. Also, just to go back to the Walker Art Gallery, Paul McCartney had an art exhibition there. The first time we'd ever had an art exhibition here in Britain. And again, I was fortunate. It's one of the perks of being a Beatles guide. You get invited to these sort of things. I was invited, and at one point in the evening, Paul asked everybody, well, what do you think of my paintings? And a voice from the crowd shouted, don't give up the day job, Paul. Because his paintings are interesting, but I don't think that he would have made a living as an artist. Right, now John Lennon started his first band, the Quarrymen, because of a Scotsman. No, not Stuart Sutcliffe, no, a Scotsman. Had a big hit in 1956 with a skiffle band and a song called Rock Island Line. Lonnie Donegan, that's it, Lonnie Donegan had a skiffle group. Sorry, just in case you don't know what a skiffle group is, it's basically a sort of ad hoc homemade band. Somebody with a cheap guitar, a tea chest with a pole in with a piece of string, and you had a bass, a wash bush is Google it when you go home, okay, and a banjo and a piece of a comb and a piece of paper, and you had a skiffle band, and skiffle lasted for about 2 records, I think. It was very, very quick. George's grandparents lived in the next road, Albert Road. During one of the books, George said, as a child, down to Albert Road to visit his grandparents. Then he'd just come back home again, but he left here when he was 5. So he must have been about 3 or 4, coming out, walking around, not like a And I think you'll agree with me, having seen George's house, that Brian was born into much more affluent circumstances than any of the Beatles. Furniture shops called Epstein's, and also music shops called NEMS, North End Music Stores. But it was here in Walton that John Lennon first met Paul McCartney. On the right-hand side you'll see a red brick building with a red roof. That is St. Peter's Parish Hall, and that is where John and Paul first met on the 6th of July 1957. John and his band, the Quarrymen, had been playing behind the church here on the left at a church fete, and It's the usual sort of thing, you know, there's the crap fields forever. Because coming up here on the left-hand side are the gates of Strawberry Field. And if you look through the gates and you look across, you see the building over there. That originally, up until 2 years ago, that was the Salvation Army Children's Home. And the Salvation, actually, it's up for sale now. The grounds are, because the Salvation Army these days, children, they go to foster parents, they don't go into... By the way, just in case you're expecting to hear music, you can sit at home and listen to music. You can recognise the house because it's the one coming up on the left-hand side with a blue plaque on. And the reason this house has a blue plaque on, and English Heritage do not put a plaque on a house where a famous person's lived until they've been dead over 20 years. Now, unfortunately, it's over 20 years since John Lennon died. John's bedroom was the small bedroom over the porch, over the front door. And this house is now owned by the National Trust, and it's part of a tour. You visit John's house and also Paul McCartney's house that we'll see a little later in the tour. And I do strenuously advise you to book in advance because it's only open April to September and it's only open Wednesdays to Sundays, and it's not open constantly. You can't just walk up and knock on the door. But come on, show them round, give them a cup of tea and a biscuit. Of an evening, every night, John rang the middle of the Mike McCartney tour, and they're standing there, and you can stand where they stood practicing their playing, and also where they were sitting when they were writing the songs, because they didn't sit together. One would write a song and show it to the other. They didn't write songs between them. They'd alter odd bits, but this has been converted back to how it was in the 1950s.
Property of the National Trust.
And they used Mike McCartney's photographs to identify the wallpaper furniture, because it's not the original. A lot of the original furniture was in John's house. And relative days, china cabinets and tables and
Was this the original bus actually?
No, I don't think this was the original bus, but it's an old one,
Yeah,
that's for
but
sure.
it looks like it, doesn't it?
It does. Smile.
And the shelter in the middle of the roundabout. John Lennon's first wife worked as a Saturday girl in Woolworths behind the makeup counter, and John would go and visit her in the afternoon, talk to her. In the evening, he used to give her a present. A lipstick or something else he'd shoplifted while he'd been talking to her. There's the bank on the corner. But the banker never wore a Mac in the pouring rain. He didn't have to. He had a motor car. So he just ran from the bank to the car. On the far side you'll see Tony Slavin's, the barber's shop. And this white building, it's now called Sergeant Pepper's, or it's not called anything because it's closed up at the moment. This was the shelter in the middle of the roundabout. That was a bus shelter. And that is where John, Paul and George would meet up and get the bus. They didn't have a drummer, because you can get a guitar on a bus, it's very difficult to get a drum kit. And they used to tell people the rhythms in the guitars. There's Tony Slavin's on the left-hand side. The barber's shop. The only person we know who went to the barber's shop was Paul McCartney. None of the others, but because it never stopped the barber telling people this was the Beatles' shop. And if you go up the Church Road on the left-hand side, just over the hill, that is where George Harrison was born. So they're very close. Now we're just riding down Penny Lane, and this one's led to the Penny's Farm. Coming up here on the left-hand side, where all the various committees can sort it out, this is going to be the George Harrison Gardens or whatever. But as I say, there are various committees and it's taken an awfully long time. How to slow something down, have a committee. Coming up here on the left-hand side, this white building, there's some road building here, just on the left now, this is Dugdale Towers. And the Beatles would play here for £5 a night. And in 1969, a man called Freddie Mercury lived here. He was the lead singer with a Liverpool band called Ibis. You didn't know that now, did you? That surprised you? Yes, Ibis were very successful, so he formed another band you may have heard of called Queen. They were a little more successful. But Freddie had come to Liverpool because he reckoned Sergeant Pepper. By Welsh builders, and unfortunately they're scheduled to be demolished. A government initiative called Heartlands, perfectly decent houses being demolished. As they say, don't get me started, but unfortunately one of them is the birthplace of Richard Starkey, window stop. Count 5 houses down. The first house that is not boarded up on the left-hand side is where Richard Starkey was born on the 7th of July 1940, making him the